I wanted to do a sound check. Can folks hear me in the room?
Actually, not loud enough. Miguel, can you turn it up, please?
Great. Is that any better now?
IT is adjusting the volume.
Okay. I can hear you just fine.
Okay, we'll wait just a little bit more so we could get our general counsel here. Commissioner Ellison, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay. This meeting is in session, and I'll do that because it's fun. So this is the special open meeting scheduled for Wednesday, January 3, 2024. It is 1:04 p.m. right now, so apologize for starting 4 minutes late. And with us, we have our counsel, Ms. Erica Stefans. Can you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Aguilera,
Present.
Commissioner Ellison,
Present.
and Commissioner O'Connell is not here as he has recused himself from this matter. With 2 commissioners, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance and the state pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. All right, the next item on the agenda is consideration and approval of the agenda. I do have one suggested change, which is item 6 on the agenda. approval of prior meeting minutes. Given that we do not have Commissioner O'Connell here, I think it would be best to postpone the approval of the December 14, 2023 regular open meeting minutes until our next open meeting. And so that would be the only change that I would have to the agenda. Commissioner Ellison, do you have any?
I concur with your suggested change. Otherwise, I have no other suggestions.
Okay. In that case, I move to approve the agenda except for current item 6, which is approval of prior meeting minutes.
I second.
Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
the vote passes by 2.
Okay, thank you. We're moving through this pretty quickly. So the next item is public comment. Do we have anybody on Zoom that is signed up for public comment?
Commissioner, we do not have anyone registered on Zoom.
Okay. Do we have anybody in the room? Looks like not. So the next item on the agenda is announcements, and I do have one announcement about a closed session that occurred yesterday. On January 2nd, 2023, January 2nd, 2024, Commissioner Ellison and I met in closed session pursuant to NMSA 1978, section 1015(1)(h)(3), deliberations by a public body in connection with an administrative adjudicatory proceeding. I affirm for the record that the matter discussed during the closed session was limited only to those specified in the notice and agenda for that meeting, specifically deliberations regarding docket number 22-00270-UT in the matter of the application of Public Service Company of New Mexico for revision of its retail electric rates pursuant to advice notice 595. I further affirm that no official or final actions were taken. That is the only announcement that I have. Commissioner Ellison, do you have any announcements?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, we'll move on to the next matter, which is the only item that we have on today's agenda. And this is regular action item A1, 22-00270-UT. And Mr. Robert Lundeen will be our advisor who will present this item. Please go ahead whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon. First, I would like to start off by saying and extending my congratulations to you and to Commissioner O'Connell and to Commissioner Ellison for having completed your first year of service as commissioners of the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. There's no better way to cap off your first year than with a rate case, especially one as big and litigated as this one. So you can give yourself a pat on the back. I have for you today a final order that has been drafted over the last several weeks since the December 8th filing of the hearing examiner's recommended decision. We've spent many hours drafting this final order and discussing it, and we've all sacrificed our holiday season with our families to get this for you today. So I would just like to recognize all the effort that the rate case team has put into this, as well as the commissioners It's been an extraordinary effort, and I think we should be proud with the work product that we have today to vote on. The final order would adopt the recommended decision on various issues. It would not adopt the recommended decision on some limited issues. Ultimately, this final order would implement final rates for PNM in this case. That is, there would be no supplemental proceedings other than various compliance filings that will become necessary in the future. This final order is the last order the commission shall enter in this docket. You're very well aware what's in the final order. It's been worked on up until 20 minutes ago. So I will stand for questioning. I don't have any further to say, and Godspeed.
So before going into any of the merits, I also want to recognize all of the effort that went into this rate case. The hearing examiners did an excellent job on just an enormous case that has issues that have been hanging around for several years, and advisory staff as well, after the recommended decision came in, did excellent job in distilling the recommendations in that recommended decision, in considering and summarizing the exceptions, and helping Commissioner Ellison and I prepare for making decisions on this. So on top of that, the parties as well, who really put a lot of effort into this. There are thousands of pages in this case alone, and I think it's a testament to how important these issues are. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody who has had a hand in evaluating this proposal. I think for now, I will stop my comments and see if Commissioner Ellison has any further comments, either procedural or substantive, on the merits.
Thank you, Commissioner Aguilera. I would like to ask Mr. Lundin if he would mind discussing at a very high level those points where this final order differs from the recommended decision. I think that would be helpful to folks who are watching this meeting.
Yes, sir, I can do that. So to address the issues as they are presented in the RD, first is Four Corners. The commission accepts the recommended decision on Four Corners in full. That is the finding as to prudence and as to the remedy. The second issue regarding Palo Verde, the commission largely accepts the recommended decision in full, with one small caveat that staff's proposal for the mechanism to return the Palo Verde regulatory liability to customers shall be approved. That is as a bill credit amortized over 2 years without carrying charges. For the issues related to San Juan, the commission would adopt the recommended decision. On issues related to rate of return, including ROE and capital structure, the commission would adopt the recommended decision. On cost of service, the commission would again adopt the recommended decision. As for issues related to operating expense, this one is a little bit trickier because there's a lot of small issues in there. Largely, the commission would adopt through this final order the recommendations of the recommend decision. But there are at least 2 exceptions, I think, that are approved related to construction work in progress and property taxes. And for construction work in progress, it differs from the RD only to the extent that it identifies what those costs are. And as it relates to property taxes, it would just specify that to the extent any mistakes were made in the calculation on the rate base, that those should be corrected. For the issues related to regulatory assets and liabilities, the commission's final order would adopt the recommended decision, and additionally provide kind of further guidance, but also caveating that with a determination that this final order would not be precedential on these issues. The regulatory assets and liabilities would have certain conditions associated with them, and that's explained in the final order. Conditions relating to carrying charges. On issues related to rate design, that is class banding, class allocations, customer charges, volumetric rates, the commission's final order would not adopt the recommended decision to hold supplemental proceedings. Rather, the commission would implement an approach to setting rates that's justified and explained in the final order, but broadly speaking, comprises setting a customer charge for residential and small power classes, adopting P&M's customer charges, meter and demand charges as well for the other rate classes, and then adopting staff's proposal for class banding and allocations and volumetric rates. Additionally, the final order would address the BESS project, that is the battery energy storage solution, I believe. The 12 megawatt battery storage project that was recently approved by the commission earlier in December and issued a CCN. This final order would just recommend additional safeguards be put in place as to the rate recovery of that project. And I believe that provides a full summary, broadly speaking, of the final order.
Did you mention the time of day?
I did not, and thank you for noting that. This final order would also not accept the recommended decision to reject the time of day proposal. This final order would adopt P&M's time of day pilot rate proposal with certain safeguards in place, such as annual compliance filing. Also with a customer charge to match the Schedule 1A customer charge.
Thank you for that. You know, I guess I want to have some or provide some insight into some of the discussions that we had during our closed session. So the closed sessions for this case were extremely helpful for me. You know, they began with the hearing examiners explaining their recommendations and the 2 commissioners asking questions, trying to understand the recommended decision and where they were coming from to the extent we had any additional questions. I mean, I thought the recommended decision was very thorough and, you know, very clearly explained a lot of the issues, especially with respect to Four Corners. But that closed session was very helpful to to be able to hear directly from the hearing examiners as to, you know, what their considerations are. And I think, and we had discussions also with our advisors after that, who were recommending either changes to the recommended decision or recommending, you know, if we had questions, recommending adopting the recommended decision on specific issues, and just a general deliberation on those with our advisors. One of the topics that we discussed to a very great extent is the banding. In this case, the recommended decision did not recommend any specific banding or within rate class allocations. And so this did require a lot of discussion and deliberation and compromise in terms of figuring out how to establish the rate design. The recommended decision recommended to holding supplemental proceedings. I think I probably would have worded it a bit differently. I do think that the general intent of the RD is correct, because it's very difficult to design a rate when you don't know the revenue requirement. And but I do think that stakeholders working through the PRAC, the pricing advisory committee that PNM has, would have been very beneficial to us to have stakeholders get together and hopefully develop a proposal that could be presented to the commission for approval. The way we're doing it now, we don't really have an opportunity to hear from stakeholders, because while they did provide input into input as to their own banding proposals that they would wish us to adopt, they were based on different revenue requirements. And that's just, you know, it's helpful to some extent, because it gives us recommended principles that we should consider, but it doesn't fully solve the problem. And so, you know, that's one thing that I think probably took most of our time, just discussing that. And, you know, I also want to mention, you know, it's obvious here that we only have 2 commissioners participating. That adds another element. You know, usually you could, you know, maybe at the open meeting try to convince another commissioner to or try to sway them in your direction, explain it, but it's a lot harder to do that with just 2 commissioners, because you only have 2 votes and they're equal. And so I did want to mention that, because I think with certain issues, there is a lot of compromise that, you know, we just need to achieve. And I plan to issue a separate statement, and you'll see, with respect to, for example, the banding, or you know, there was some accelerated depreciation requested for certain gas plants. So I will explain my position in those statements. But again, I think the overall outcome that we have achieved is reasonable. So I think at this point, I'll turn to Commissioner Ellison to see if he wants to add anything or discuss a different or specific topic.
Thank you, Commissioner Aguilera, before I make comments on specific provisions of this final order, there are a few items that I did want to raise pertaining to the final order to further discuss. One smaller issue is that I don't believe the recommended decision or our final order specifically addresses the whole house EV rates and how they would change as a result of this rate case. It's obviously a pilot, and it's understandable given the number of issues in this case that one was not specifically called out. At the same time, I think it couldn't hurt to be specific about it. My thinking is that pilot project rate of about 3 cents a kilowatt hour at night, that it should increase by the average residential class increase. So, for example, if we're talking about a 3.8% residential class increase, then that whole house EV nighttime rate would increase by that same percentage. So that's, we can talk about that, or I can go through the other couple of issues that came to mind.
Well, you are certainly correct that that was not something that was fleshed out as much as other issues. Mr. Lundin, can you remind me what the PNM's proposal was?
Yes. First, I would say that yes, it's not addressed in the final order, mainly because no exceptions were filed on that issue. Additionally, to my knowledge, it's not addressed in the recommended decision either. And I think that is due to the recommendation to hold supplemental proceedings. But in the final order, in adopting staff's proposals and methodologies as far as banding and class allocations and volumetric rates, looking at Georgia at Ramey Exhibit 8, there is proposal for the whole house EV rate of about 3.1 cents per kilowatt hour. It's listed as a new rate, so I don't know whether or not increasing it based on the average increase would be appropriate, since the current rate is listed as no value. However, I know in PNM's application, and I'll pull that up, there is a current rate value associated with the whole home EV rate and a proposed rate value. So I think under that context, it would make more sense to propose an increase. However, we wouldn't be adopting PNM's proposal on this issue. So I hope that makes sense. But given that this is not one of the issues that we did a deep dive into, I'm kind of operating on the fly here. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Ellison, I think with respect to this issue, at some point maybe we should have a break and I can go back to look at what the original proposal was. And then maybe we could discuss it after that.
That would be fine. I just wanted to mention that, PNM's original proposal was to increase that nighttime rate by 5%. And that was, we should consider that in the context of their proposal was to increase the residential rates by about 9.7%. So somewhat less than the average increase. I guess given the fact that that rate is so low at 3.04 cents per kilowatt hour, an increase on the order of 3.8% is not going to amount to very much, and giving them the average residential increase, given that period of time is outside of the normal block structure, seems reasonable to me. But I'm certainly happy to discuss this issue more after a break.
Okay, thank you. I think you said you had other issues.
I did have a couple others that I wanted to bring up before talking more generally about the final order. Another one was on this construction work in progress associated with the Palo Verde expired leaseholds, the undepreciated balance on those expired leaseholds. This was obviously discussed in the RD and is discussed in the final order. The point that we didn't have the chance to discuss this particular issue in closed session because there were so many other issues. One hesitation I have about this is that I don't believe that PNM had much of a choice in these investments. In other words, once it had agreed to extend the leasehold on these Palo Verde units another 8 years, I don't think they had the option to not make these contributions. I could be wrong about that. I just didn't see any evidence around that point. And, I fully understand staff's and the interveners' arguments about used and useful, that if, this, I believe it was 9.6 million, were considered construction work in progress, that you could say that it was never used and useful under that test. At the same time, again, it does seem to me that PNM probably didn't have much leeway in making those investments once they had decided to extend the leasehold agreement. So I wanted to have a discussion with you, Commissioner, about that issue.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, Commissioner Ellison, yes, I I understand the points that you are making. And is there a specific change then that you are proposing to the final order?
So the specific change that I'm proposing is to allow the construction work in progress amount to remain in the regulatory asset, but earn no return, which is, the treatment that we are giving to all of the Palo Verde leasehold investments that were made after the decision to extend the leases was made.
Right.
So I guess the judgment call here is whether we put more weight on the used and useful test, or whether we put more weight on whether P&M had any choice in the matter of investing these funds under their leasehold contract.
Yeah, I mean, I was persuaded by the arguments about the used and useful test. I at the same time I do see what you're saying. I think I think it's definitely a close call. I think at this point I would probably continue to defer to the RD.
Okay, let me bring up one other point. Just noting that this point is still there. On page 68 of the final order, we have under the block rate allocation, we have that block one is to have a volumetric rate decrease not to exceed 4%. And I wanted to ask whether we're being sufficiently specific in using that language.
That's a good point, Commissioner Ellison. And actually, this is one of the edits that Commissioner Aguilera requested me to make just a few minutes prior to the open meeting. That not to exceed language has been removed to eliminate any kind of doubt as to what the percentage decrease should be.
Okay, thank you. Well, perhaps Commissioner Aguilera, after we have that break and come back and talk about the whole house EV, we could briefly revisit the construction work in progress issue, you know, if you know, if it's appropriate, I could give some of my thoughts about some of the specific decisions in this final order.
I think that would be helpful. I think it's probably a little too early for a break, so.
Yeah,
I
sure,
think that would be
of course,
helpful.
of course. So, you know, some of my thoughts about our final order here. I agree with the Four Corners power plant prudency determination and remedy, which is in the recommended decision and which we're adopting here. I believe it is a meaningful yet measured remedy. To me, it's clear that, you know, when a utility is faced with a major resource decision, that they should do a timely and thorough analysis, and that they should document that analysis. And my view of PNM's actions in this case is that having done an analysis in May of 2012 and then made the final decision and signing the fuel contract in December of 2013 does not constitute a timely analysis, that a lot of things happened during the interim, including, you know, changes in fuel price, natural gas prices. You would expect that resource prices would change in the interim. Having a year and a half go by between the analysis and the decision, in my view, is unacceptable. So I really view this as a case that PNM was negligent in its decision-making process. At the same time, it's not clear to me that an updated analysis would have necessarily changed the decision that they made. I therefore think that the remedy here, which is no profits on the amounts invested after that decision to renew the Four Corners participation, is a reasonable and balanced decision. In my view, the Four Corners plant has been and is used and useful. It obviously contributes to PNM's reliability. And I personally reject a mechanical, you know, if we found it to be imprudent, then we must disallow all investments, or a mechanical, if it's imprudent for whatever reason, then we've got to assess actual harm and require that amount of harm as a remedy. I think that is penalizing PNM for an outcome that could not have been known at the time of the decision. You know, this really, in my view, is not a punitive measure. That isn't what the, you know, what was intended here. in my view, this really sends a signal that we do expect major resource decisions to be taken seriously, that there be a timely and thorough analysis done. And I believe that requiring no profits for those amounts invested as a result of that imprudent decision is a measured and reasonable remedy. I also think on the Palo Verde leasehold extension, that the prudency determination was made previously and was upheld by the state Supreme Court. Therefore, what was left for us was to determine a remedy. I do believe that the remedy of no return on those the undepreciated balance for those assets similarly is an appropriate remedy. To discuss a few other matters, we are deciding here to accelerate the depreciation of two of the gas plants that PNM owns, the Luna and the La Luz plants. However, our decision here is to accelerate them until January 1st, 2045, not the 2040 date requested by the company. And some of the reasoning behind that is that it is questionable whether these units can be retooled to operate on 100% hydrogen. That hasn't been done yet, to my knowledge. So, there's just a lot of uncertainty there in my mind, whether that is even possible. So I think that it's reasonable to address the depreciation issue here. At the same time, the law is asking for requires no net carbon or no carbon emissions from power plants as of January 1st, 2045. The company has declared a voluntary goal, which would be 5 years earlier. The fact that the company has declared a voluntary goal, I think, is not controlling here and should not determine what the commission does. I think that we should be focused on what the law requires. So in my view, this is the correct approach. We did make the decision here to approve the time of day pilot. I do have some misgivings about the residential rate structure. One of them is that pretty soon as we start to get the San Juan replacement resources online, the large solar plants, I think that PNM will have an issue with needing to curtail some of the power produced by those plants because of the mismatch between when the power is produced and when consumers are consuming it. And so to me, it would be logical to take that into account and offer a lower daytime rate. That is being done for the small commercial class, which I think that is reasonable. But I am disappointed that that's not being offered for the time of day pilot. At the same time, I think that it is reasonable to encourage pilot projects to start getting data so that the company can move forward on a true time of day rate, with the view that at some point there may be an opt-out time of day rate. Obviously, we're not there yet, but my thinking is that the time of day pilot is a fairly small investment that hopefully will yield some useful results. On the cost of service, I do think that staff's proposal of 175% of average increase for certain customer classes that currently are below cost of service is reasonable, and with the lower band of 25% of the average, the required increase for customer classes that do not need to have increased rates to approach cost of service. I think that is reasonable. I think that the customer charge for residential customers going to $9.95, which is a 40% increase, is reasonable. It certainly is much less than the actual cost of customer charges, the actual cost that P&M incurs to serve each customer, but it is a gradual increase, and we made the decision to, in looking at the residential block structure, that the block 1 rates would drop by 4% in partial compensation for that increase in the customer charge, that block 2 would remain the same, and that block 3 would increase as much as needed to yield the appropriate revenue for the residential customer class. I also think that that's a balanced approach that is the result of compromise. I think I'll stop talking there.
Okay, thank you for those comments. On the Four Corners issue, I just want to say that I agree with your comments and the RD in terms of finding imprudence. I think the remedy that was provided by the RD is reasonable. I think it appropriately balances the interests of ratepayers and investors in this situation. I do think that not allowing any profits sends a strong signal that due diligence on behalf of customers needs to be done. And so we respond obviously to exceptions on many sides of that issue in the final order. And so our responses and reason for adopting the RE in full on that issue are explained there. On the accelerated depreciation, I agree with your comments, Commissioner, that allowing accelerated depreciation for 2 of the plants to 2045 is reasonable because that is where the law leads us in the ETA and renewable portfolio standards. I don't think, however, that that's where we need to stop. I think we could have accepted the proposal for accelerated depreciation for all of the gas plants that were being requested. But again, this is where it is difficult with 2 commissioners, and we need to achieve a compromise. And I think that allowing 2 of those plants to move to 2045 is a proper has a proper basis in law. And so I'll approve the order on that part, with respect to my vote, but I think we could have accepted the entire proposal with respect to that issue. On the time of day, I agree with you that we might not know if these are the appropriate prices to have permanently. And that is why it is a pilot. I do think that time of day rates, if installed appropriately, can help customers reduce their bills and help the system overall in terms of reducing the need for additional capacity and the need for additional investments that we might be able to avoid. And so I think it's important for PNM to implement this program as a pilot. It's opt-in, nobody is required to do it. But I think that the data that they will receive from this will inform the prices that I encourage be implemented at some point, because I do think there are benefits to ratepayers and the system overall. And so that is why I'm happy to approve the time of day pilot and hope that it leads to a rate design that can help ratepayers in a few years, probably. With respect to the customer charge, I do agree in principle that we should get customers closer to their actual cost of service, so as to reduce some of the subsidization that occurs. I thought the Attorney General's office explained it very well in their testimony on this issue, in saying that supporting moving to everybody's actual cost of service, but noting that there are other factors that we need to consider, including the impact to low income consumers, efficient consumers, and to send the correct price signals. As Commissioner Ellison noted, by increasing the customer charge, which we are doing here by 40%, which is the same amount that the commission approved in a prior case, in a prior P&M case, I think we are effectively, we are getting customers closer to their cost of service, but we're also shifting some of the cost from those customers who are Block 3 customers to those who reside in Block 1. And so that to me also is something that I'm considering as I recommend then reducing the Block 1 rate and increasing the Block 3 rate, because I believe that it is appropriate to do that in accordance with cost causation principles. Those who consume more are placing a higher burden on the grid, causing the need for more capacity, more investment, and therefore I think more burden should go to those. And I think those price signals are appropriate to encourage conservation and also consider some of the other factors that I mentioned, such as the impact to low income consumers. At the same time, you know, if there, I do think that we want to consider the adoption of EVs, for example, and they consume a lot of power. And so I think considering that in balancing the rate design here is also appropriate, so as to not discourage the adoption of EV and you know, potentially customers who might want to change to electric heat or so I guess those are the things that I wanted to talk about, and also in response to your comments, Commissioner. I don't know if you wanted to have any further responses to my comments.
You know, I might mention just a couple of things. You know, I guess, you know, on the you know, sending the conservation signal point, we obviously had discussions on this, and you know, my viewpoint is that, you know, we should really be trying to get the prices right that reflect a true cost of service, and let the consumer make their own decisions as to consumption. That, you know, if we are artificially increasing, say, the third block of residential consumption to encourage conservation, that we're also, by doing that, discouraging EV adoption and building electrification, which are things I don't think we want to do. And I really see the whole house EV rate as a fix, because we P&M has this inclining block structure, and as a fix to that, for folks who want to adopt EVs, has this whole house EV pilot project. It strikes me as somewhat like the federal tax code, where we have the AMT, this alternate minimum tax, because there are so many loopholes and tax benefits in the tax code that it was necessary to create some parallel structure to deal with that. And my feeling is that that's what the whole house EV rate looks like. So I would prefer to see utilities move more towards a flat rate like SPS has, and then to see an adoption of an opt-out time of day rate that really does get at, I think, some of the issues that you're concerned about with cost causation, because I think it's not just the amount of power that's consumed, it's when that burden is placed on the system that really determines a lot of the costs of maintaining and building out the system. That being said, I think what we've reached here is an appropriate compromise that doesn't increase block 3 too much, and that provides some relief to block 1 from the $2.84 increase. And I would note that right now there is obviously the San Juan rate credit, and there will be the Palo Verde lease rate credit over the next 2 years. That's we have so many issues in this case, it's incredible, but that's one that I wanted to comment on, is as well the 38.4 million in over collections last year from the expired Palo Verde Unit 1 lease of about 100 megawatts. And just for everybody listening in to that, what happened here is that at the end of 2022, the PNM's Palo Verde Unit 1 lease of about 100 megawatts capacity expired. However, that was included in the rate base. And so in 2023, PNM continued to collect funds for a lease payment that they didn't have to make. And so it is eminently reasonable to require those amounts to be refunded to the ratepayer. And quite frankly, I'm surprised how vehemently PNM's lawyers argued here that that treatment would be impermissible retroactive rate making. As I see it, to have collected money for a lease that doesn't exist, and then to hold that those funds should not be returned to ratepayers, is an unreasonable argument, and quite frankly weakens PNM's position as a whole. So I see that as an entirely appropriate and reasonable decision.
Thank you. I agree with your comments on Palo Verde. And as to the whole house EV rate, I think, we'll go into a short break so that I can recap on the proposal here. But just generally speaking, I think it's helpful. I agree with your observation that we should be encouraging use at certain times. I think there are benefits to everybody as a whole. You know, if we don't send the appropriate price signals, then people will charge their vehicles whenever is convenient. But what that will cause is a need for more capacity, which everybody will have to pay for. And so I do think that this program provides a lot of value. So I'm taking a look at those rates now, and I guess at this point, Commissioner Ellison, I would suggest maybe breaking until 2:30, if that is okay with you, and then we can reconvene.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so we're on break then until 2:30. Okay, I see Commissioner Ellison is back and it is 2:30. So we'll resume this special open meeting. Commissioner Ellison, during the break, I did have an opportunity to look at P&M's proposal with respect to the whole house EV rate, and they proposed to increase it, I think it was by 5.01%. You know, I honestly, I see increasing the rate by the system average as would be adjusted by the banding for residential, the residential schedule as reasonable. I could also see an argument for leaving the rate as proposed, but given that that was not the proposal here, I think my starting point is to consider the proposal and the rates here are all being adjusted based on our banding proposal, which I plan to mention later, actually, because I don't think we've discussed the exact numbers. And so I think increasing it, and I want to see if you're understanding it the same way as I am, increasing it by the system average as it is, that is being adjusted with a banding. So in other words, the same increase that is being made to the residential class. Yeah, and so I think that would be the most consistent thing to do here. As I said, I could see an argument for leaving it, but the proposal was to increase it. And so that's, if that was your proposal here to be clarified in the order. In fact, I think if we had not clarified this in the order, I think that probably would be a reasonable assumption, is that we are approving an increase for the whole house EV rate.
I did want to ask Mr. Lundin, if we are silent on this issue in the final order, what would happen to this nighttime whole house EV rate?
Commissioner, to answer your question, and the final order clarifies that the commission would adopt staff's proposal as to banding, class allocations, and the volumetric rates. And for the volumetric rates, that is the underlying methodology there, because obviously all the volumetric rates would change with the customer charges and the revenue requirement. So with that being said, if it was not mentioned or not clarified in the final order, I believe staff's whole house EV rate would be approved, which is 0.0312271 cents per kilowatt hour. However, that number could very well decrease by some amount due to the customer charge for the Schedule 1A class and the commission's approved revenue requirement. And then further, staff's proposal is only very minorly different than P&M's. It's less than I think a tenth of a cent difference. So even though staff doesn't specify the percent change, it's roughly a 5% increase over the existing rate as well.
Roughly the same as what P&M is proposing here. So Commissioner Aguilera, I would prefer, given that there is some uncertainty here, and given that P&M's proposal was really based on what they thought should happen to residential rates overall, I think it's appropriate for us to clarify here and to specify that those nighttime whole house EV rates increase by the percentage of increase of revenue requirement for residential rates as a whole. So if that turns out to be, say, a 3.8% increase in residential revenue requirement, that the nighttime whole house EV rate would also increase by 3.8%.
Okay, but then there's also the issue of the customer charge, which is being increased under this order to $9.95, and so that impacts this rate as well, because a customer charge is the customer charge that is applicable to the whole house EV program.
Yes, I mean, I understand that those whole house EV subscribers are getting, are paying the normal block rates, outside of those nighttime hours. So, to some extent, that's already been taken into account with the adjustments we're making in the normal block rate schedule. But, this nighttime rate of 3 cents a kilowatt hour, is so low. I think an average residential rate increase is appropriate to apply here.
Okay, I mean, yes, the rate is low by design in order to, as we discussed a short while ago before the break, to encourage a shift in consumption from high consuming devices. I think the rate is rates need to be adjusted from time to time. I think this is a reasonable one, so I would agree with you on that point. So I think maybe our council could, just clarify that in the order.
And yes, sir, and we're agreeing to average system, or for an average increase based on the average increase to the residential class. Is that correct?
Yes, to residential, I think that's what would make the most sense. But unfortunately, this is one of the issues that we did not discuss, or that was really, to my knowledge, discussed thoroughly during the hearing, and I don't recall this in the recommended decision. I guess one thing that I will note is that PNM was not proposing to increase it by the system average, it appears. It appears that their proposal was to increase it by a little bit less than that.
I would agree that that's what their proposal was. But I think given that we're looking at a considerably smaller increase here, that, using that average increase for the residential class is reasonable.
Yep. Okay. I think that's reasonable as well. So thank you. So I think we have perhaps one issue left to discuss, and that is the quip for Palo Verde. As I mentioned before, I was persuaded by the comments that raised the used and useful arguments in this case, and was struggling to see PNM's point, especially because I believe they were arguing that there was no whip at all.
Right.
I think the recommended decision on this, if I recall correctly, was asking staff to weigh in further, and I know that other parties weighed in on the issue, and so in considering this, I did find, for example, the joint interveners' arguments to be persuasive.
I agree, Commissioner Aguilera, that the record on this seems confusing. That with staff arguing that there is construction work in progress that should be disallowed, and PNM arguing there isn't any, is quite confusing. And I think that confusion wasn't very helpful in making a determination here. So, again, as I see it, we sort of have two competing issues. One is if you use a strict used and useful test, then the way that these investments were categorized as construction work in progress, then you would argue that, well, these were never used and useful and should not be part of the regulatory asset. Another way of viewing it is that, in my opinion, and again, I really haven't seen, evidence to this, but in my opinion, once PNM agreed to extend the lease period on these Palo Verde assets, units 1 and 2, I don't think they had much of a choice in making these investments, and so from that standpoint, I'm not sure that they should be penalized. But unfortunately, I don't think that latter argument really came out in the hearing, although I do see it as a strong argument.
Yeah, I think if we went that way, we would be making the company's case for them. I'm concerned, and also deviating from the RD on something that I agree with you is a close issue, but also on the other hand, persuasively argued, I think, by the opposing parties.
Okay. Well, Commissioner Aguilera, in the interests of getting this decided, I'm not going to dispute that issue anymore. I wanted to bring it up for conversation since we have not had the opportunity to discuss it. But I will not contest that issue.
Thank you for raising it. Um, so, I think the final order does a good job in explaining where the commission is coming from. Thank you again, especially to Mr. Lundin, Alejandro, thank you as well, for drafting it. And as I mentioned, I will have a few separate statements. And I don't know, Commissioner Ellison, if you plan to as well. But I think overall, this represents a reasonable compromise that is in the public interest. And then I did want to, I wanted to go back actually to the banding, because I don't know if we explained, and we may have, but if we did, I'll just emphasize that the banding that is explained in the order is that provided by staff, which includes an upper band of 175% and a lower band of 25%. Again, I would have preferred to have a proposal from much like the RD recommended from PNM that was developed with stakeholder input, but we are in this situation instead, and so that is the banding that we landed on as a reasonable measure. So, Commissioner Ellison, is there anything that you would like to close with before we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is communications with commissioners?
I would like to make just a few more comments here. I do see the rate design and the banding as a policy decision that is appropriate for the commission to make. I understand the difficulties of making that decision without an exact revenue requirement calculation. It is frustrating to me that we could not call on staff's expertise or anyone else's expertise for assistance in this matter, but I think that's something we're working on by getting some additional help on the commission side. But I do see that rate design as being a policy decision that is appropriate for the commission to make. I suppose I was personally uncomfortable with essentially a settlement process by which we handed that off to the parties to decide. So personally, I feel good about that the commission did make the decision on that here. I wanted to comment a little bit more on the Four Corners power plant prudency and remedy, since that is such a key part of this decision. I think it's clear that issuing a harm-based remedy is very difficult. Just the calculation itself is fraught with issues and difficulties. And I think because of that, we've seen some commissions like the Oregon Commission in a previous case issue a flat 10% write down. And I think what we're doing here with this remedy is it has a much stronger basis that it is a basis in no profits should be obtained from this investment. And I did want to comment on, in my view, why was that no profits remedy translated into a write down? And in my view, the commission really has no control over the timing of an abandonment filing. If we had imposed purely a no profits remedy, it would have really left the size of the remedy in the hands of the company. In this case, we're doing something that the commission has control over. We have control over the form of the remedy, and we've chosen here to impose a remedy that has certainty, no matter the timing of the abandonment. So, I just wanted to comment on some of the reasoning, at least my thinking behind why I support that remedy proposed in the recommended decision. I wanted to echo your comments, Commissioner Aguilera, in that I really commend our hearing examiners, Christopher Ryan and Anthony Medeiros, for a monumental effort here. I know Mr. Ryan was holed up in his house for a month or more, working on this in every available hour. And Mr. Medeiros did the section on the Four Corners remedy, which is as long as some entire recommended decisions are, and they did an amazingly thorough and competent job on this recommended decision. I also want to commend Mr. Lundeen with the assistance of Mr. Martinez on excellent work on this final order. I'd also like to say, Commissioner Aguilera, that I appreciate your collaboration in having reached this decision. Having only two commissioners does indeed have a different dynamic to it, and I very much appreciate your spirit of collaboration and compromise. I think we reached a very strong, well-founded, and balanced decision here. I think that Team PRC really came together on this effort, and I'm proud of the product that we produced.
Thank you for that. Very well said. And, would love to adopt your comments as my own. Okay, so the next section
I'm sorry,
on
Commissioner. I'm sorry for interrupting, but we haven't taken a vote.
I'm taking a vote.
A minor detail.
Minor detail. So I think that we do have a few small modifications to make to the order. as we have discussed here. And so I move to adopt the final order as modified in this discussion.
And
You're
I
muted.
would, yeah, and I would like to clarify, Commissioner Aguilera, that that those modifications are the nighttime whole house EV rate increase of the average residential customer class increase. Were there any other modifications that we had decided on?
No. There was one edit actually that I wanted to make sure, and I apologize for forgetting to raise this. It is in the section that concerns accelerated depreciation for some plants.
Commissioner, do you want me to clarify the edit?
Yes,
or-
please.
Okay, just to confirm the edit was made. I removed a sentence related to the RPS, the 2045 RPS standard. In the context of accelerated depreciation. It's a non-substantive edit in the sense that it doesn't change the outcome decision. It's just, I guess, one of the proposed bases for the decision was eliminated.
Mr. Lundin, could you point me to where that is in the recommended in the final order?
Yes, Commissioner, I believe it is paragraph 118. And the sentence appeared roughly in the center of the paragraph. You should be able to see it on your draft, but on my draft, it is currently eliminated.
Okay, and I'm sorry again, which sentence are you proposing to eliminate?
So there is a one sentence actually. So this is discussing fossil fuel resources to serve retail customers until 2045. So I am proposing to end the sentence there. Delete the remaining part of that sentence and the citation that goes with it, because in our recommendation here, we are only discussing until 2045, and I do not want to speculate or prejudge what can happen after that, given that we don't need to do that here.
Okay, I guess I'm looking at paragraph 119 where that sentence says, regardless, the commission finds it prudent that PNM's gas-fired power plants with service lives and depreciable lives extending beyond January 1st, 2045 should be accelerated.
No, I'm actually in paragraph 116.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
a version conflict here.
Okay.
You're looking at the correct paragraph, I believe, Commissioner Ellison. On my page, it's 118 because I have the latest version.
Okay.
So I think we're looking at the right paragraph. It's just, it should be the last paragraph in the section. The following section being on regulatory assets and liabilities.
Just before regulatory assets and liabilities. Yeah,
the citation to NMSA 1978, section 62 16-4 should be roughly in the center, somewhere in the center of that paragraph. And this is the edit that we're discussing about deleting.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm still not seeing what's being deleted here, what the proposal is.
So, there is a statement, and let me know once you find it, that starts with further to the extent the renewable portfolio standard plays a role in this decision. It permits fossil fuel resources to serve retail customers until 2045. So this is in our justification as to why we are approving accelerated depreciation for 2 units until 2045. And my
Thank you for that clarification, Commissioner. I will add that first. I deleted the whole sentence. So what I'm hearing from you now is that you would like to keep the first half of the sentence in?
yes,
Okay, I can make that edit.
Yeah, I really don't see anything like that in in my version of the document, unfortunately.
okay. Actually, I agree with you deleting that entire sentence. Yep. And it seems like maybe that's what Commissioner Allison is looking at anyway.
You know, as long as it doesn't change the substance of what we're doing here, you know, I can say I don't mind it. It'd be nice to see the text, but you know, I'm okay as long as it doesn't change the substance of what we're doing.
Commissioner Ellison, I believe I'm now looking at the version that you have, which is the one I sent out early this morning.
Right.
It is paragraph 116, as you said. And it's towards the bottom of the page, and the sentence starts further, comma, to the extent the renewable portfolio standard plays a role. If you can locate
Yes,
that.
okay, I see that. And so it's that sentence that you propose to delete,
And the associated citation.
the NMSA, and then the parenthetical sentence as well.
Correct.
That's fine. Yes, thank you, Mr. Lundin. I see that now. That's fine.
Okay, so let me try this again to make sure that we capture the motion with that edit. I move to adopt the final order with the sentence and citation to be deleted from paragraph 116 and the modifications we discussed with respect to the whole house EV rate change.
I second.
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
the vote passes by 2 votes.
Okay, well, the next item on the agenda is communications with commissioners. I don't have anything further to say. Commissioner Nelson.
All I can say is I'm relieved that we've made this decision, that this was indeed a monumental case with a lot of issues that had been deferred. And I'm happy to have some finality around it.
Yep. So thank you to everybody who brought in their perspective. This is the way the commission and you know, the idea of utility regulation works best is when everybody is involved and different viewpoints are considered. So thank you to all. If there is no objection, then we're adjourned. The gap. Thank you.
Thank you.